So we had a great session together at TRC, Tanya Rabbi Community, which you can go to TanyaRabbi.com to take a look at. Not the session, but at least some information. People sharing some of the difficulties of day-to-day life and some of the miracles that we see in day-to-day life, which was fascinating. It was a great place to share where people feel comfortable to share, and that they get support, they get a healthy connection to the challenges and difficulties and the beautiful stories of life, and even not just the beautiful stories, but the hardships that life has. We share it all, which is beautiful. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We share today the Tanya with the coach, Michael Charles. Who else are we sharing with? We're sharing with Michael in Germany, Rabbi in Morocco, John in North Carolina, Julia in Pennsylvania, Erica is in Norway with us, Brett in Pennsylvania likewise. Who else is with us? Erica in Norway, yes. Leah in Florida, Eugenia is in Calgary, Davida and Liba in New York, Louise in Sydney, Australia, Amy in Colorado, Rena also Coloradan. Coloradan? Is that what you call her? TJ in Melbourne, Australia, Sandy is in Michigan, Joseph in New Jersey, Daphne is having a marvelous Monday in South Carolina. Of course, what else would you have there? Casey joining us from, not certain, welcome aboard. David is in California, Jan in Mexico. We have Batya with us in Montreal. Welcome back. We have Instagrammers, Akoy in Peru. We have Rachel in South Carolina. Some names I can't make out. We have Tzivia in New York, Jennifer in Minnesota. Alice is in Baltimore. Margulies, not certain. We have Carlos in Chile. And the Televenta. Beautiful. Jay has joined us. Dana in Washington State. Anne, Diana in Arizona, and is with us in Michigan. Beautiful. Wonderful. Okay. Is it possible to have two opposite feelings in your heart simultaneously? So we're talking about over here the higher level of tshuva and the lower level of tshuva. What it means, a lower level of return and a higher level of return. As we expressed it, the lower level is a contrite heart, owning what you need to own, having humility. The higher level of return is joy, to be joyful. So they're contrary emotions, And here we're talking in the instance of prayer, to have two contrary emotions. So we said it's difficult, so therefore, you know what? Separate them. At one moment, have a sense of humility, a contrite heart, sensing the things that we need to fix, and we connect to God through prayer and fixing what needs to be fixed. But ultimately, it needs to be prayer with joy, a joy of an attachment, of being connected, the opportunity to connect. So we said separate them. And now the Alter Rebbe in chapter 11 says, no, actually, you can bring them together at the same time, even though two opposite feelings. And we learned this in the first part of Tanya in chapter 34. And how can you have two opposite emotions at the same time? Is because there are two different causes that bring it about. Right? It's not of the same thing. We learned in the Zohar, if you recall, that Rabbi Shimon was learning with his father, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, the author of the Zohar. They were learning about the Holy Temple and the destruction of it. So on one hand, he was weeping in one side of his heart. Why? Because destruction. And the more you understand how great the home of God is, the more you're going to weep for its destruction. And he understood that because his father was teaching him. But at the same time, he had also joy on the other side of his heart, because he was now being introduced to the mysteries of the Torah, and how those mysteries of the Torah that teach us of the loftiness and the profundity, that itself evokes joy in the heart. So both feelings can be there at the same time. One, because destruction brings weeping, feeling the pain of the loss, and joy, on the other hand, because when you understand something deeply, the mystery of something, that itself is a cause of joy. So the same thing when it comes to prayer. We can have both feelings at the same time. A contrite heart for the things that we need to have, a humility and a feeling of brokenness that leads us open to connect. And at the same time, great joy in the very fact that we are connecting. We are connecting through prayer, through davening. Now, this comes together with another very important point in our prayers. And it connects the two ideas. Right? We are saying that there's something to have a contrite heart because there's something broken in every single one of us that we need mending. And through our prayers, we open up ourselves to connect to the divine, to bring a divine mending. Right? That's humility. That's a contrite heart of the individual. So, and then at the same time, a joy in the very fact that connection is to the divine a positive, beautiful, wonderful opportunity that is given to us. And therefore we need to engage it with great joy in that connection through prayer. Now, together with that, we need to have faith and a surety, a confidence in our heart, a certainty that God delights in kindness, and He is gracious and merciful, abundantly forgiving. The instant that we entreat Him, God forgives us and brings cleansing and atonement. As it says, God is abounding, compassion, erases my transgression. He cleanses me, purifies me, erases my sins. All verses in Tehillim and Psalms. And what we need to have is confidence beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is what's happening in our prayers. And as we say in the Amidah, in the Shemona Esrei, we say, pardon us. We say to God, right? Sachlanu machal lanu. And then we say, blessed are you, God, gracious one, who pardons abundantly. Now, that's a prayer, which we say with God's name. And we know that there's a general principle that it's forbidden to recite a blessing when you're doubtful of the obligation, because then you're pronouncing God's name in vain. You're not allowed to do that. So, if there was the slightest doubt whether God would be forgiving me and you, right? The person who did something wrong, right? We all have something that we need to, before God, to be cleansed of, to be forgiven. So if we were doubtful if God would be forgiving, we would not be able to pronounce that blessing. In other words, there is no doubt whatsoever that when we truly ask God to pardon us, that He forgives us. Furthermore, if we were not to repeat transgressions, right, which is very easy, by the way, because your mind can go very easily, mine does at least, in prayers that I kind of, the stream of consciousness in your mind goes away from the focus. Very easy to do that. The next blessing after asking for forgiveness and we're forgiven, it says, blessed are you, God, who redeems Israel. You bring redemption. In other words, if we were we would get redemption. We become redeemed. Now, he explains this further. Every human being, when someone hurts you, pains you, and they come to ask for forgiveness, you need to forgive immediately and not be cruel. Even if someone were to cut off your hand, the Talmud tells us that someone comes and they ask for forgiveness and they truly, sincerely mean it, you have to forgive them. The Talmud tells us that if you ask your fellow 3 times for forgiveness and they don't accept your forgiveness, you don't need to apologize anymore. King David asked the Gibeonites, the Givonim, to forgive King Saul, who had killed some of their people, and they refused to do so. David later on decreed that these people should not enter and be part of the Jewish people. You know why? Because the Jewish people, one of the traits is you need to be merciful. And they weren't merciful. They were not forgiving. It's a divine trait to be forgiving. So a human being needs to be that kind of forgiving. Could you imagine God? He's infinitely more forgiving than any human being. That's quite powerful. As a matter of fact, the Talmud tells us if a person, we see that they are not a forgiving kind of person, we have to check their lineage. Maybe they're not part of the Jewish people. That's how embedded it is in the soul. That's how important it is to be forgiving. That's on a human level. You know what that means on a divine level? That when we ask forgiveness of God for whatever, of course, if you did something wrong to a human being, you need to ask them. It's not enough to ask God. You have to ask forgiveness from a human being if you did something wrong to them. At the same time, whatever harm you did to another, you did the harm to God, and therefore you need to ask also of God. And if we really mean it, God is truly forgiving. The point being over here, as this adds greater joy in our prayers, that when we have something that we have to own, and we own it, and we're asking to be pardoned, God truly pardons us. We're going to go more into that in tomorrow's class to understand to what degree. Is there a limit? And we'll see the distinction between human condition and the divine condition. We will learn more about that. But this is very powerful. And therefore, there's a sense of joy that we have that we've asked for forgiveness, and we're assured in our heart, it's abundantly clear to us that God is forgiving. All right, any questions, any comments? Joseph, how should we forgive? By confronting the person or have intellectual forgiveness? Excellent question, Joseph. So, now some people will say, well, if the person's going to ask for forgiveness, I'll be forgiving. And that for sure is necessary. Again, if a person doesn't have a contrite heart, and is got a sense of humility, they're like, yeah, that thing I said to you yesterday, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, not exactly contrite heart. That's why 3 times, if you didn't do it the first time properly, maybe, so you need a second time. Don't do it immediately right after, process it. Know that you hurt someone. Know that you hurt someone. And that itself should bring about a compassion that you don't want to hurt somebody, that you ask for forgiveness. So what happens if the person doesn't ask? So the power of forgiveness is not something that is only when someone asks. Although here, the context over here is that the forgiveness brings greater joy to the individual, knowing that you've been forgiven, right? That's the context over here. Yet, on human terms, if a person can be forgiving before the person even asks for forgiveness, that's a much more lofty, evolved kind of person, because they didn't need the other in order to be forgiving. They found in their own heart the compassion to be able to do that. So that's even greater. Davida, can you forgive someone in your heart even if they never apologize? Okay, that's what we just explained. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was what we just said. Yeah, Brett. Oh, no, Vincent, sorry. What if a person is wrong and they think that you're wrong and want you to apologize, and they keep repeating their behavior? Good question. Um, so if you could teach them and show them how they're wrong, and they're going to listen, so then you should try to help them and guide them. But sometimes people don't get it, and they're not a vessel to get it. So sometimes you have to work it out within yourself and just let go, to be forgiving. Understand what a compassion it is that this person doesn't get it. Imagine how unfortunate that person is. We all have something that we're blind to about ourselves, because the love blinds us to ourselves. So there's something we're blind to. So just like I'm blind to something in me that I probably repeat over and over and don't recognize. So likewise, another person is blind to something in them and they repeat over and over. So we kind of forgive ourselves for it. We don't even forgive ourselves because we're not even aware of it sometimes. We're not even necessarily aware. So if we're not aware of something, then we seem to be okay with it. Someone else is not aware. So again, if we could do it on our own, if we so choose. Now, again, if you can help that person, then help them. Sometimes they're not ready. Thank you, Vincent. Brett, are there sins that shouldn't be forgiven whether or not the perpetrator apologizes? By the way, apology doesn't mean that there isn't a consequence, whether in a court of law, justice, right? Apology to the person, yeah, but that doesn't mean there isn't consequence. We should not equate the two things. They're not, someone murdered somebody. Can't bring that. So, can you accept an apology? Well, if it's someone of a loved one and you're pained, it's possible that you could do that. If, again, sincere and whatnot. But sometimes you can't accept the apology because the harm wasn't to you. That's a famous story with Simon Wiesenthal, that a Nazi at the end of the war went to him and said, I have to apologize for what I did to Jews. So he says, I can't accept your apology because you did nothing to me. So I can't accept the apology. You have to go to the people that you hurt, killed, or to their families that might be still alive. Can't. So someone can't come and apologize, to me for something that you didn't do to me. So in that sense, you can't accept it because it's not for you to accept the apology, because you weren't the damaged party. Is there something that you can't say, forgive the person? I mean, maybe there's nothing. That maybe you could. Again, apologize doesn't mean there isn't consequence. Is the Nazi coming to apologize because he's afraid of the consequence? And it's not a true apology. Should the Nazi who killed innocent people still get justice? Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you accept the apology? Well, Simon Wiesenthal couldn't because it wasn't to him. Go to the graves or the lack of graves of all those people and ask apologies. Which sometimes is what we have to do when we apologize to someone and they're no longer alive. You have to go to their graves and ask for an apology. There's such a thing. Okay. Should we forgive the same sins that God forgives? Not exactly clear on that question, what that is. But yeah, definitely. Drawing from Davida's question, Leah asks, I was wondering the same thing. Do we forgive in our hearts and continue the relationships as if they had apologized even they did not? Therefore, not holding that resentment for the wrong that they just letting it go. Yeah, forgive and get it out of your heart. If you can work that through, that's the best thing for the individual. Especially, usually it's, small things, minor things, like, someone said something embarrassing. Someone said something, hurtful, nasty. Definitely those things. Those small things, for sure, let go. And don't wait for that person. That's a big blessing that you can do that. Absolutely. Okay, Levi, I see that, there's questions. Thank you. Okay. Attalise, what about people who say that they are sorry but keep on hurting? Should we keep on forgiving them? Tomorrow we're going to learn a little more about that. Okay? Excellent question. If you can hold on to that tomorrow, if you don't mind. Is it okay to forgive but not forget? It depends. Sometimes it's good to forget also. But sometimes you shouldn't forget. Because you don't want to, sometimes forgetting you might bring about the same situation. So you want to make sure that you're not in the same situation, that thing that happened should happen again. So don't forget. Sometimes it's good to forget. But forgetting, we learned that earlier, is when the person not only asks for forgiveness, but they also do something extra in order that they should appear before God like they were before they sinned. So they bring a gift. Times the Holy Temple, that was an offering on the altar. Then it was fasting. And now it's tzedakah. So there is that concept, but that forgetting then is more about what the person does, that they should be looked upon as if they never sinned. Now, can you look at a person that way, even if they don't ask for forgiveness? Now, think about that a bit. You could see the part of them that didn't sin, that you could. Forgetting doesn't mean that, that person is not culpable for something and didn't do something wrong or whatever the case may be. Forgetting means that I'm now looking at them, not at their behavior. I don't relate to them by their behavior. I relate to them by the core of their soul. And that's godly. So there is place for that. There is place for that. Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. Excellent. Tivia, Bella. I think accepting someone's apology helps us more than the other person. Correct? It's not healthy to hold on to anger in your heart, but to find a way to forgive the person. It's really helping yourself. 100%. 100%. That's what we're saying. But we're saying even if the person doesn't even ask, it's still a healthy thing. Are there stages or steps to forgive others? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. Now, so if a person, for example, is abusive or a predator, can you forgive them? So if it's a predator to someone else, you can't. You can't forgive them. How do you forgive them? They didn't harm you. So you're forgiving that this person's... No, it's not your business to be forgiving. Can the person who's been, the predator has done damage to, can that person be forgiving? For sure. Even if they don't ask? Yes. But that doesn't mean now you become friends with them. Forgiving doesn't mean we're old pals. No. The person's a predator. The person's abusive. The person in marriage can be abusive. Can you be forgiving? Yes, you could. Should you? It depends. Because you gotta be careful. Sometimes you're forgiving out of weakness. You're forgiving out of weakness. You're just forgiving because you're more comfortable in the victimhood of the perpetrator, of the abuser, and it just might be more comfortable place to be than getting out. So be careful that it's not used in a way that is inappropriate. Sometimes you gotta get out and then be forgiving. I'm just afraid that sometimes it's that forgivingness is going to be very detrimental. And it's coming not from true forgiveness, it's coming from a weakness. Hamid, how can one prevent the forgiveness of certain folks naively? How can one prevent the forgiveness? I don't know what that means. Hamid, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase that? Okay, anybody here? Welcome, Mark. Ruthie. Simcha. Zar. Any other questions? All right, folks. Beautiful. Amazing. Tomorrow we continue the conversation. Some people take advantage of us having naive and simply apologetic for the sake of apologizing. I hear. Let's need a little more about that. All right. we'll continue the conversation on this tomorrow. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. By the way, you get the reruns. You can get it on my YouTube station or TanyaRabbi.com. Also, we had a class, an amazing class yesterday that you can get also on YouTube or on TanyaRabbi.com. And TRC. We had a beautiful session yesterday. Come and join us. And Rambam rather is coming up right in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Have an amazing, wonderful day.